We need to talk about unprofessional. And by talk about, I mean we need to admit that it's a veiled attempt at unfair discrimination and do away with it. The dogma of professionalism is invoked with the utmost conviction, yet holds all the conceptual rigor of a fairy tale. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, the library is open and I'm about to read Professionalism for Filth. Before anyone comes for me, let me make something that should be obvious, clear. When I say do away with the concept of professional, I'm not referring to context-appropriate behavior, or the codes of conduct that regulate certain fields of work. I want to make this clear from the jump, because I have found that the second you challenge a generally accepted practice, the traditionalists whip out a strawman argument quicker than you can say, "Okay, boomer." A typical status quo preserving strawman argument I've heard with regards to professionalism is, so everyone can just do and say what they want at work? Of course, this is not what I'm saying. Rather, my argument is that we need to pick apart the assumptions that underpin the average person's understanding of what is and isn't professional. The literature on professionalism focuses almost exclusively on profession-specific professionalism. Here, traits that are discussed are typically values-based conceptualizations of professionalism such as excellence, humanism, accountability and altruism for medical professionals, ethics, competence, honesty and courtesy for legal professionals, or independence, conscientiousness, and determination for teaching professionals. However, in practice, when the average person brands someone as unprofessional, it more often than not as a result of a deviation from the white Western male standard for normalcy. When we think unprofessional, we don't think altruistic, courteous, or determined, do we? No, we think hair, clothes and CV font size, which is beautifully illustrated in anecdotal evidence, shown in the original post, of a young woman with blue hair being told by a customer that she is unemployable, while at her actual job. This example shows how being labeled unprofessional really has nothing to do with the ability to make authoritative decisions within discretionary spaces, and everything to do with feigning suitability in order to comply with the dusty, crusty, musty white male standard. I'm a white male, so I'm allowed to call the standard dusty, crusty and musty. The gag is, nearly a century ago Marshall, 1939, was already saying that professionalism is much less about organizing work and more about organizing society. Yet, empirical research from this very year offers evidence that people mindlessly draw on professionalism discourse in order to justify biased views of people of color within employment spaces, and the crustiness does not end with racial discrimination. Another example of such discrimination is shown in the original post of a woman, by the name of Jules, who has a bald head and scalp tattoo, being told she does not look professional. Jules works in business administration and technology. As far as I could tell, this work does not involve hair modeling or any kind of work that would require a pristine scalp. Yes, I am being facetious, but only to emphasize how trivial the unprofessional label is. However, in its trivial nature lies the danger. The trivial label is arbitrarily applied, but with significant material consequences. Being labeled unprofessional can impact performance reviews, limit advancement opportunities, and even cost someone their job. One common argument in defense of superficial professionalism standards is, the customer won't like it. To that I say, by Felicia. You wouldn't tolerate a racist customer saying they do not want to be assisted by a black employee, so why would you tolerate objections to tattoos? One of the reasons I feel so passionate about this is because I have worked quite a bit in youth development, specifically preparing young people for entering the job market. Almost always this process involves stripping the person of any identifiable sign of individuality. Wear this, say this, don't say that, compile your CV like this, write your emails like this. As a result, the majority of job readiness interventions are less about empowerment and more about turning people into the blandest possible versions of themselves in order to achieve congruence with the white male standard. In order to constructively address this issue, one needs to keep in mind that formal employment as we know it today was constructed with the white middle-class man at its center. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, gender, race, and cultural ideology of the time were used to define professional identities and legitimize cis-white heterosexual middle-class men's claims to privilege. This blueprint for the ideal worker remains intact to this day, creating a minefield of discriminatory practices woven into the very fabric of the modern organization. Yikes! So how do we do better? First, as I've mentioned, we need to acknowledge that the unprofessional brand is a systemic problem. Second, we need to reflect on our beliefs about work and how the white male blueprint hides behind seemingly objective standards of professionalism. This means asking ourselves and each other if the standards of professionalism we are upholding in our employment spaces are really about protecting the profession or protecting white male privilege. Third, based on the aforementioned reflections, we need to continuously evaluate and amend policies that reinforce unfair discrimination disguised as professionalism. Lastly, and this one might be a bit tricky, find alternatives for the expression unprofessional. Just stop using it. Instead, collaborate and come up with standards of professionalism that are more directly linked to work outcomes and refer to deviations from these standards explicitly, as opposed to blanket, unprofessional labels. In so doing, instead of fixating on arbitrary characteristics like hairstyle or choice of clothes, you are linking specific behaviors to specific work outcomes, reducing the likelihood of systemic unfair discrimination. Do this or risk me calling you crusty.